Part 27. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 261. 259 War Never Changes. War never changes. Just as Chunyuan opened his eyes from the dizziness, he heard such a sentence full of vicissitudes. He felt as if he was sitting on a rickety place, and there was a sound of pattering footsteps and creaking wood. He immediately became alert and looked around, only to find that Yi was sitting opposite him, seemingly still awake. Moreover, the clothes on the two of them have been replaced with very worn clothes, which are covered with patches, and because they have been washed too many times, the original color can hardly be distinguished. And, now he and Yi seem to be sitting on a wooden cart pulled by two oxen, and the cart is full of all kinds of waste products and parts, as well as some strangely shaped fruits and vegetables. He, are you sober? The old man driving the cart turned around and said with a smile. He was carrying a gun on his back. It looked like it was artificially made in a small workshop, and it was very rough. Chunyuan immediately grasped the information in his words, rubbed his forehead and said, I can't, I'm still dizzy now. I don't even know what happened last night. Ha 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 ha. The old man laughed loudly. You two drank at least a case of rum yesterday, do you know that you have slept for 16 hours by now? Ha 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 ha. You are so drunk, get in the car, tell me to go to Boston, and then fall asleep. This is terrible, I don't know why I came to Boston, Chunyuan said with a smile. At least you can go to the Diamond City. It's the brightest green emerald in the Federation. Ha 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 ha. The old man was very talkative, and began to blablily introduce some Boston customs to Chunyuan. But Chunyuan basically couldn't understand the things he said, such as where there are mutants, where are plundered and occupied. Chunyuan looked into the distance, sighed suddenly, and asked lightly, have you been a soldier before? Why do you suddenly ask that? The old man asked back. War never changes, Chunyuan repeated the sentence, feeling a little sad. Yes, just like my previous life. Although I borrowed the hands of the biggest drug lord to eliminate countless small drug dealers. Although sacrificing himself destroyed the biggest drug lord, even with the most optimistic estimate, the criminal transactions in the border area can only be quiet for 5 years. There are always profit seekers who don't know how to live and die, and there are always victims like him who sacrifice their lives to fight against evil. As the saying goes, war never changes. Have you ever been a soldier? Old man. Chunyuan asked. War, the old man looked into the distance. Yeah, war never changed. There are wars everywhere here. I heard that the West NCR and Brotherhood of Steel have been fighting for several years, and Caesar's Legion is also there. There's a kick in there. But I've never been a soldier. Chunyuan nodded, silently digesting the content of the old man's words. The old man said again, do you know? I passed by the Red Rocket maintenance station the day before yesterday, and saw a strange man in a blue tights and with a dog, who was tearing down the iron plates on the billboards. I see he was quite interesting, so I went over to have a chat with him, and bought him a bottle of beer. Don't tell me, even though that guy is a man, his ass under the tights is really upturned. Ha 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 ha. Chunyuan's eyes froze, a weirdo with a dog. Wait a minute, is it the tramp with the dog that Lin Huo said? This is his only message to the world. When he went to the world of Resident Evil before, at least he had heard of it and watched a movie or two, but later he felt that this contradictory garbage movie was so eye-catching and stopped watching it. But even if it turns out that the world of Resident Evil has nothing to do with the movie, at least he has a concept of that world. But now, what the hell is this shit Fallout for? He doesn't even know what Fallout is. Why the hell is it for? Is there any difference? Chunyuan showed interest. That guy is a man with a story? Said the old man, I just chatted with him a few words, but I can see that he was a soldier, and I can tell it with every gesture. War, war from unchanged. After he finished saying this, he dragged the billboard and left. I only saw at that time that there were several corpses of predators lying where he was sitting just now. Chen Yuyan smiled, took out 2 cigarettes, and handed one to the old man. Respect the war. He. Respect the war. The old man took the cigarette and lit it, took a deep breath, and his eyes lit up immediately. The smell of this smoke. It's so pure. Only the kind of well-preserved pre-war cigarettes have it. Such a feeling. As long as you like it. Chen Yuyan took out 3 more cigarettes and handed them over. He was going to give a pack, but he heard that the cigarettes didn't seem to be common, so he took out 3. Then I won't be polite. The old man took the cigarette, took out a piece of red silk, wrapped it carefully, and put it in his arms. My name is Hardy, Hardy Crest. How about you? Young man. Chen Yuyan saw that the piece of cloth seemed to be torn from a skirt, and took another look with interest. This world should be a world of supplies and their scarcity, but it seems that they are no strangers to things like guns. And since the old man mentioned tights, it means that the textile industry in this world also has a certain level. And before the war? What pre-war? Second World War? So it's not long after World War II? Looking around, it seems a bit like that. He thought for a while, and then replied, my name is Chen Yuyan, you might as well just call me Yan. Okay, young man. We are almost at Ten Pine Village, and then I will go to Fanglin Town to deliver some goods. Do you want to rest at Ten Pine Village, or come with me to Fanglin Town? Old Hardy asked. Let's go to Shizongzhuang. Chen Yuyan said. Before he figured out the situation, he didn't want to go too deep into this place. Old Hardy was a good man to talk to, but he was on his way. At this time, Yi also woke up from a coma. She blinked her big eyes and looked around, then looked at her clothes, feeling a little puzzled. But she didn't talk nonsense, she just looked at Chen Yuyan with searching eyes. Hee, your girlfriend is awake? What a beautiful little girl. It's like the stars in the sky. If I were younger, I would definitely be fascinated by her. Ha 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 ha. Old Hardy laughed for a while, took off her hat and saluted Yi. I salute you, the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. Yi glanced at him indifferently, then turned his attention to Chen Yuyan again. Chen Yuyan patted her hand lightly, signaling her not to mess around, and then said to Old Hardy, what kind of place is Shizongzhuang? Or, tell me more about Boston. Old Hardy didn't care about Yi's rudeness, and he replied, Ten Pine Village is not big, there are about 10 families note 1 living in it, and they farm for themselves. I know the old Gracie there very well. Yes, he is good at playing the guitar, maybe you can even hear him play a piece, ha ha ha. But if you want to talk about Boston, then you have to start with the Federation. You know Federation, right? That's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that's a long story. Old Hardy opened the chatterbox, while Chen Yuyan quietly listened to the old man's nagging, trying to catch any useful information from it. Note 1, Boston in Fallout 4 is a miniature version, and many locations are crowded together, which is the result of rushing work in the late game. Therefore, I will reasonably enlarge the scenes depicted in the book. After all, it is unreasonable to live in Shizongzhuang just like in the game. Thanks to the book friend 201903021054222274 for the reward of 100 starting coins. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 262. 260 The Shrouded Shadow. The ox cart stopped at the intersection of a small village, which is what Hardy called Shizongzhuang. The village was built on a relatively flat mountainous land. There are some sparse trees in this mountain area. I don't know if the name Shizongzhuang comes from that. Thank you, Hardy. Then we'll see you later. Chen Yuyan jumped off the bullock cart and waved to Hardy. However, it was only then that he discovered that there were two oxen pulling the ox cart, and it was clearly an ox with two heads. This made him stunned. Hardy also waved his hand and said, "Okay, young man, see you next time. Old Gracie, this young man is my friend, you have to treat him well." He said the latter sentence to another old man with a big brim hat next to him. The old man is also a very open-minded person. He smiled and said, "No problem. My wife has already made a delicious razor blade soup. This young man and his girlfriend will definitely be full." Hardy finally nodded to Chunyuan, waved his whip, and drove away in the double-headed ox cart. "Let's go, young man, come and taste my wife's handicraft." Gracie old man brought over a tattered aluminum pot filled with thick soup, which seemed to be a crop similar to barley. Chunyuan picked it up and took a sip. A strong aroma of wheat filled his mouth, but it was still a bit astringent. In terms of taste, it is naturally not as good as rice porridge, but... Chunyuan looked around without any trace, and there were some very dilapidated houses. This feels a lot like a ruined city, where the ruins of the houses are repaired with wooden planks and iron sheets, which is barely leaking. Moreover, those iron sheets are rusty, and there are molds everywhere on the wooden boards, which should have been for a long time. In such a village that is not even considered a refugee camp, one cannot expect too much to be able to eat such thick soup. Yi also took a bowl of razor blade thick soup from the hand of the old lady, and drank it in big gulps. The old man Gracie looked at Yi lovingly, then looked at Chunyuan, and asked cautiously, "You guys really got drunk last night, and then old Hardy sent you here?" Chunyuan secretly wrote down this key point in his heart, but he didn't show his face at all, and replied naturally, "Yeah, I heard from old Hardy yesterday that we drank a whole case of rum. Actually, I was drinking it at first. Beer, I don't know when I started drinking rum." As he spoke, he rubbed his forehead rather annoyed. After hearing that he was indeed drunk, the old couple were obviously relieved, and the old man's attitude warmed up. "Where are you from, boy?" Gracie asked. "My adopted daughter and I are working as mercenaries in Washington, D.C. Chunyuan also got some information from old Hardy before, and he learned and sold it to make up one for himself." Gracie's face changed suddenly, and even the hand holding the bowl visibly shook. "Are you, from the gunman?" Chunyuan looked at him blankly. "What is the gunman?" "It's also a group of mercenaries." Gracie was clearly organizing his words carefully. "No, my mercenary organization is called Wolves. We mainly take on the jobs of caravan guards." Chunyuan replied. Gracie breathed a sigh of relief again. "Oh, the Wolves, right? I haven't heard of it. Is this girl your adopted daughter?" The old woman asked strangely, "Is there not that much difference in your youth?" Yi has been very unhappy with the idea of adopting a daughter since just now. She hugged Chunyuan's arm and said displeasedly, "I am my father's daughter. Not an adopted daughter." Chunyuan sighed softly, and once again displayed his Oscar-level acting skills. Touching Yi's hair, he said pitifully, "We grew up dependent on each other. There is no need to say too much, this demeanor and expression have already explained everything." As expected, Gracie and his wife got the answer Chunyuan wanted them to get, nodded, and looked at the two of them much softer. After this small embarrassment was resolved, the atmosphere among the few people became much more harmonious, and they chatted while drinking the thick soup. Their topic first started with old Hardy. It turned out that Gracie and old Hardy had run a caravan together before. But then they encountered looters, and Gracie was shot in the knee during the firefight, so they returned to the Federation to live a life of farming. Old Hardy didn't forget his brother either. In the following time, he would receive a few orders from the Federation every few months, and then come over to see him and bring him some small things. It was also because of this that Gracie did not reject Chunyuan too much. During the conversation, he vaguely hinted that people on the Federation side are basically xenophobic. As for why, Gracie did not say. Chen Yuyan had already inquired about the so-called Federation from Old Hardy before. The so-called Commonwealth is a separate administrative region established by the United Kingdom hundreds of years ago when the United States was still a colony, also known as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It was once one of the most developed industrial areas in the United States and maintained a semi-independent relationship with the United States. In the subsequent war, this was also the key target of nuclear bombs. After the war, the Federation seemed to exist for a while, and then completely died out, but the residents here still habitually call it the Federation. Chen Yuyan's words were naturally incomparable. He not only obtained a lot of information, but also made the old man and the old lady laugh. Gracie also took out a bottle of Wuxia whiskey from his collection, and drank it clean with Chen Yuyan and Yi. Taking advantage of the alcohol, Gracie took out his guitar, laughed at Yi and said, "Let me sing a song for this cute and beautiful little girl." Chen Yuyan also clapped his hands and laughed. Gracie's wrinkled, black-stained fingers plucked the old guitar's strings and sang, like an earthquake, starting to roll. I felt my world shake, out of control. Like a world war starting to brew. Baby, it's just you. Ha 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 ha. Gracie greeted Yi with a big smile, "Baby, it's just you. Ha 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 ha." Chen Yuyan was also laughing while beating time. Yi leaned his head on his shoulder, and the old woman danced awkwardly with a piece of rough black bread in her hand. The atmosphere was harmonious. But at this moment, suddenly boom boom boom. There was an angry knock on the door, and a hoarse voice said in a low voice, "Gracie. What are you doing so late? Do you want to?" Gracie's expression changed drastically. He quickly put away the guitar, and said to Chen Yuyan, it's too late, go to sleep, go to sleep." The old woman also hurriedly began to pack the tableware. Chen Yuyan was in high spirits. Seeing Gracie's performance, his heart sank suddenly, and he asked in a low voice, "What's wrong? It should be around 7 o'clock in the afternoon now. Could something have happened?" Gracie took a deep look at him, but he sighed and didn't answer. "The old woman will squeeze with me tonight, you go to sleep in her room." After speaking, he held the old guitar and trembled. Walked away. Chen Yuyan and Yi looked at each other with doubts in their eyes. "I hope you have a dream that will be undisturbed. Good night." Gracie said something strange, and went back to the bedroom, closing the door with a bang. When they came to the old woman's room, the two sat on the narrow and shabby bed, but neither of them intended to sleep. Chen Yuyan would never share the same bed with Yi, otherwise he would become a beast. It didn't matter to Yi, but she was full of energy and couldn't sleep. "Gracie, seems to be hiding something? Why do you have to go to bed after 7 o'clock in the afternoon? Why can't it be loud?" At this moment, the system prompt that has not appeared suddenly came. Mission begins. The ultimate goal, to remove the shadow that hangs over the Commonwealth. Secondary goals, the experimenters are asked to explore by themselves, and rewards will be given according to the degree of completion of the secondary goals. Task duration, unlimited, but it will affect the score of task completion. Tip 1, this world is a single player mode. Only you, an experimenter, can enter, and if you successfully complete the ultimate goal and score above A, this world will be automatically bound to you and become your exclusive world. Tip 2, during the mission, the experimenter is not allowed to leave the Boston area. Hint 3, after the experimenter monopolizes this world, expansion missions will be gradually released to expand the area the experimenter can go to according to the degree of development of the experimenter's power in this world. When the power rating of the experimenter reaches the national level, the whole world will be completely open. Chen Yuyan was surprised that there had been no mission reminders before. Now it seems that he needs to realize that something is wrong with this place before he starts to release the mission. What is the shadow that hangs over the Federation? How is it eliminated? Compared with the previous Resident Evil world, which clearly stated the goal of living until January 1st, Juju, the current task is really very vague and has no clue at all. This is simply the meaning of throwing him into this world and letting it develop. Chenyuyan sighed softly, looked at the leaking doors everywhere, and had no choice but to put his mouth next to Yi Yi's ear and whisper, "Our mission goal this time is to eliminate the shadow that hangs over the Federation, and we don't have any clue yet. More investigation is needed." When he spoke, a faint fragrance came from Yi Yi's body. "This smell is very light, but it smells very good." It doesn't seem to be the smell of perfume, but her own smell. Chenyuyan hurriedly opened up a little distance. "Grassy and the others were very scared just now," Yi Yi said. Chenyuyan nodded and said, "Yes, no matter what, there is obviously something that scares them. Since we don't have any idea about the mission, let's start here. Go out and have a look?" Yi Yi asked. "We're not going out tonight. Let's go meet the villagers tomorrow and have a chat with them. It's not too late to act after that," Chenyuyan said. Yi Yi nodded, and then leaned her body on Chenyuyan's shoulder, her head almost touching his face, her soft black hair hanging down like silk. Chenyuyan had no choice but to maintain this posture, constantly enduring the torment of the warm and fragrant nephrite in his arms, and began to regret why he didn't bring a game console to pass the time. "Father, Yi Yi really wants to go on like this forever," Yi Yi said softly. "If you didn't call me Dad, maybe we could really be like this forever," Chenyuyan complained in his heart. "But since you call it that, then it seems that I can go on like this forever." Chenyuyan suppressed the wild thoughts in his heart, put his arms around Yi Yi's shoulders, and said softly, "Hey, Dad will always be by your side to protect you." "No. Yi Yi wants to protect Dad. I am very powerful," Yi Yi said. "No matter how powerful you are still my daughter. Dad will always be the one who protects his daughter, so, Dad must always be better than his daughter." Chenyuyan's heart began to calm down, enjoying the tranquility. "Well, Dad is always the best." Yi Yi's voice became smaller and smaller, and then her body completely relaxed. She leaned on Chenyuyan, and fell asleep just like that. I don't know how long it took. Chenyuyan suddenly became alert. He turned his head suddenly, but met an eye in a hole in a wooden board on the wall. "Who?" Chenyuyan yelled, stood up and rushed over. However, only a bang was heard, and Yi Yi was faster than him, kicking a big hole in the wall with one kick, and the whole person rushed out like lightning. When Chenyuyan flashed out, he saw Yi Yi standing in the yard with a panicked young man stepping on his feet. Judging by his tattered clothes, he seems to be from the village. He looks about 10 years old. Looking at the big hole in the wall, his face is filled with fear. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Who are you? Why are you spying on us?" Chenyuyan asked sharply. I, the young man's eyes flickered, and his eyes kept moving between Yi Yi's body and the hole in the wall that she kicked out, but he couldn't shake out a complete sentence. The noise here woke up the grassy couple. He came over with a flashlight, and when he saw the young man trampled under his feet one by one, he exclaimed, "Casper! What are you doing here?" I saw outsiders here, so I wanted to see what the hell they were doing." The young man finally thought of an excuse. However, Chenyuyan saw his real intention from his flickering eyes. It was nothing more than coveting Yi Yi's beauty. Among the ruins after the war, people like Yi Yi are indeed extremely dazzling existences. Some villagers around also started to wake up and ran over to watch. Seeing that things were getting worse and worse, the young man named Gasper had a stern look in his eyes, pointed at Yi Yi and said loudly, "She is a synthetic human." The 4,000-word chapter finally caught up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 263. 261 No way out. The synthetics. Chen Yuyan was also taken aback by this brand new term. But then it became clear that this young man named Casper chose to splash dirty water after seeing himself being arrested. What vicious intentions! Sure enough, as soon as he uttered the word synthetic human, the surrounding villagers gasped and backed away from Chen Yuyan and Yi Yi one after another. Casper took the opportunity to get up from Yi Yi's feet. With a proud look in his eyes, he pointed at Yi Yi and said loudly, "That's right. She is a synthetic human." Chen Yuyan's gaze suddenly became cold, and what he thought of at the moment was a character in a movie, Wuxia. No matter what Casper thinks in his heart, if he says this, he will not leave a way for people to survive, no matter what the accusations of this synthetic man are. Since he doesn't leave a way for others to live, then naturally there is no need to leave a way for him to live. What is a synthetic human? I just came from the capital district, so I don't know. However, you must speak with evidence. Chen Yuyan's tone was extremely gloomy. He flipped his hand and took out a military dagger and pointed it at Casper. Show evidence, otherwise, die. Chen Yuyan's aura couldn't be compared to such a bum. Casper couldn't help but backed up a few steps, his body trembling involuntarily. He looked at the eyes of the surrounding villagers, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and said bravely, She kicked a hole in the wall with one kick. Not a synthetic human, who can do it? We are mercenaries in the capital district. This time, we came to the Federation with Old Hardy to find opportunities. The wooden board on the wall can be broken by a trained person, so this evidence is not valid. Next one. Chen Yuyan approached Casper step by step, forcing him to keep retreating. Casper was completely overwhelmed by Chen Yuyan's aura, the trembling on his body became more and more intense, and he began to stutter, Why is she still not sleeping so late? Synthetics don't need to sleep. Actually, if you weren't peeping, she would have fallen asleep. On the contrary, it wasn't you who stayed up late at night and went to peep at other people's houses. So, you are a synthetic human? Chen Yuyan sneered. Go back. Casper the bastard. Yan is Old Hardy's friend. Old Hardy brought them here because he was drunk the night before yesterday. You peeped at them, but you are still here to set the blame. Finally figured it out. The ins and outs of Grassy also became angry, and he yelled loudly. He emphatically emphasized the word drunk. When the surrounding villagers heard this, their eyes became less vigilant, but they still kept their distance. I'm not peeping. Casper retorted with a guilty conscience, this woman is so beautiful. Isn't she a synthetic human? Don't believe it, let her take off her clothes to see. She must be its plastic and artificial skin. Enough. Chen Yuyan yelled loudly, and Casper sat down on the ground with a plop, unable to speak anymore. Chen Yuyan pointed at him and said sharply, admit that you got up to peep in the middle of the night because of your good looks. For such a dirty little thought, after being exposed by others, you actually framed him as a synthetic person out of thin air? How easy is it? Something. He turned to the surrounding villagers and said loudly, then what if this person goes to spy on you? Then he is found out, and he also accuses you of being a synth. What if he goes to your house to steal something, and then accuses you of being a synth? What? With the guise of a synthetic human, you can do whatever you want. You. Chen Yuyan pointed to a relatively younger woman in the crowd, and said loudly, if Casper also said that you are a synthetic human tomorrow, let you take off your clothes for everyone to see. What will happen to you? Chen Yuyan's words infected the surrounding villagers, and they began to look at Casper a little bit unkindly. I didn't. She's a synthetic. Yes. So is he. He's also a synthetic. Casper pointed at Chen Yuyan again, and began to speak nonsense. Evidence is not accepted. So, pay the price for what you said. Chen shook the dagger in his hand, and walked over step by step. The surrounding villagers were a little at a loss, and no one stood up to speak for him. It seems that they have seen too much death. You, don't kill me, don't kill me. Casper sat on the ground and moved back vigorously, but Chen was getting closer and closer. Suddenly he gave up and shouted loudly, "Synthetics are killing people. Synthetics are killing people. Let me see who dares to touch a single hair of my son." With the sound of a gun bolt being pulled, a woman in a tattered long dress rushed over and pointed a shotgun at Chen. "Mom! They are synthetics. Synthetics are going to kill us all." Casper crawled towards the woman as if seeing a savior. "He's my son. Why are you an outsider like this? Back off. Otherwise I'll shoot." The woman looked at Chen and said sharply, "You choose to point a gun at me, so it doesn't matter if I also shoot you to death now." Chen looked at the homemade shotgun in the woman's hand, thinking about the situation. The recoil of this kind of self-made firearm is often very large, and with her strength, it is impossible to suppress it, so the aiming head is likely to be tilted to one side. Her hand holding the gun was a little trembling. Obviously she didn't use the gun very often. The hand holding the gun handle was too loose, and all her strength was concentrated on the hand holding the bolt, so when she shot, the muzzle would jump to the ground due to the recoil. Top left. So, you just need to dodge to your left side, which is the right side of this woman, for an instant. While calculating, Chen said coldly, "What? Could it be that you, an uneducated son, openly framed my daughter as a synthetic person and asked her to undress in public, so you don't have to accept sanctions? Then if your son likes me tomorrow? What about the other girls in the village? What if you set your sights on someone else's property? In this case, it is not enough to reason well, the most important thing is to incite those around you. Otherwise, when the crowd is furious, he can only kill the whole village." Lu Ziyi was a counterexample, so he died extremely wronged. Chen Yuyan liked that movie very much, so he still remembers it fresh. "I don't care. He is my son. Let's see who dares to touch him." The woman no longer wanted to reason and screamed loudly. "Okay, Yan, we all know the matter." Gracie came out to smooth things over, but before he finished speaking, he saw Chen Yuyan's body swaying violently, and rushed towards the woman. Boom! The woman fired subconsciously, and the muzzle of the gun was deflected to the left as Chen Yuyan judged, knocking down a surrounding villager at once. And at this time Chen Yuyan had already rushed over. The dagger in his hand was shining coldly. "Wow!" Casper screamed, pushed his mother towards Chen Yuyan, and ran away. The woman didn't care much. She hugged Chen Yuyan and screamed like Sapo, "Murder! Synthman kill! Thank you for the 1000 starting point coins rewarded by the Star Sea Rangers. Thank you for the 200 starting coins rewarded by the Peacekeeping Infantry. Thanks to Malagus for the reward of 100 starting coins. All Heavens Unlimited Base." Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 264. 262 Fear of Synthetics. Chen Yuyan originally wanted to kill Casper, but the moment he rushed out, he also found that the woman shot another person down with a single shot. He had judged that this kind of homemade shotgun could not kill anyone. And changed his mind. "Catch the living!" Chen Yuyan shouted. Yi, who had rushed behind Casper in an instant, immediately changed his movements, kicked him down, grabbed him back and threw him on the ground. Chen Yuyan kicked the woman away with a bang, and when he came to the villager who had been knocked down by the gun, he saw that his chest was covered with blood and flesh, but the wound was not deep, so he said loudly, "Get the medicine box here." The villagers of Liashan was hurriedly moved when they heard his words, and someone ran back to the house and took out a box. Chen Yuyan opened it and found that inside were some very simple medical equipment, bandages that had been washed many times, some unhygienic cotton, and a small bottle of vodka. Supplies are scarce to such an extent that this world has been damaged by the previous war, which is far more serious than the world of Command and Conquer 100 times. Chen Yuyan's heart sank. If this is the case, what can be found in this world to fight against General Tailong and Lu Weiwei? He raised his head and said, Yi, you come and help him bandage. When she learned to speak from Wang Jinsong, she also came into contact with some human anatomy. Because one of Wang Jinsong's research projects is tiberium's erosive damage to the human body, he naturally has a good understanding of the human body's structure. Without saying a word, Yi immediately walked over and took the dagger in Chen Yuyan's hand, cut open the villager's clothes, sanitized it with spirits, and began to dig out the bullets one by one. Chen Yuyan turned around and said to the stunned Gracie, "These two murderers should be arrested." "Why catch me? They're synthetics. They're synthetics. They should be caught," Casper yelled. Chen Yuyan walked over and slapped him on the face. His voice was too high-pitched so that everyone could hear him. "You say we are synthetic humans, but you can only talk nonsense without any evidence. However, you peeped someone else was sleeping, was caught and framed, and this woman even killed someone. Tell me, which one should I arrest?" Gracie let out a long sigh, waved his hand and said, "Lock up Casper and Amer, and lock them up in the double-headed bullpen." Then he looked at the surrounding villagers and said loudly, "Go back. There are no synthetics here, and there is no academy. There are only two young people who have just arrived, and they are all Old Hardy's friends. Old Hardy, you two, we all know each other. He is not a synthetic human, he is my good friend. And these two young people got drunk just the day before yesterday, and you know that synthetic humans cannot get drunk. Well, go back." A strong-bodied villager came up and tied Casper and his mother with a twine. Casper struggled violently and roared, "Walter! Why are you doing this to me? You should be dealing with them. They are synthetic humans." "Enough!" The burly man interrupted Casper sharply. "Do you think I don't know what you are like? Casper? It's obvious. You're going to spy on this beautiful girl and get hit after breaking it. You actually framed them as synths. You make me sick. I said a long time ago, whether it is a college or a synth, they don't exist. They don't exist." Speaking of which, Walter pulled the knot hard, and the hemp rope strangled Casper tightly, and he cried out in pain. Yi over there has also completed the initial wound treatment, stood up and wiped his bloody hands and said, "There are 9 bullets in total, but they are not deep, and they have all been taken out. There is not enough medical supplies here, and antibiotics are needed. If not, you can only observe for one night. If the wound becomes inflamed and festers, it will be very dangerous." She acted like a professional doctor, but in fact, she just learned some knowledge about the human body and medicine while studying Chinese with Wang Jinsong. It can only be said that Yi's learning ability is really abnormal. Gracie nodded with a wry smile and said, "We don't have antibiotics here, and we don't have any medicines. We just occasionally collect some herbs around, but they are all used up now. Well, let's send more back to rest and pay attention to his injuries. Everyone go away." The crowd gradually dispersed, and Gracie sighed as he looked at the wall with a hole in it. "As for the wall, I'll fix it for you tomorrow. However, I think we should have some things to talk about," Chen Yuyan said. Gracie nodded. "Let's go." Back in the house, Gracie moved the tattered table they ate at to cover the hole, and sat on the stool in silence. Chen Yuyan took out a cigarette and handed it over. Gracie sniffed hard. "It's a good cigarette. It seems that you did well in the ruins of the capital. What is a synthetic human? What is an academy?" Chen Yuyan asked. Gracie lit a cigarette and took a deep puff. The aroma of carefully roasted shredded tobacco filled his mouth immediately. He inhaled all the smoke into his lungs, and when he exhaled it, the smoke was much thinner. At this moment, his mood improved a lot, and he whispered, "Actually, these are just legends, but this has become our nightmare." Chen Yuyan listened attentively. Academies are everywhere, and no one knows what they really look like. They just know that they have incredible high technology, and they are extremely evil. They will even, Glass said here, with an extremely serious face, even, to create human beings. Making humans. Cloning humans. Chen Yuyan asked. Grassy shook his head, "I don't know what clones are. But synthetic humans should be made of various artificial materials, similar to robots. However, they are smarter than robots and more like a person. And the most terrifying, what's more, the Academy will quietly kidnap one of us and replace it with a synthetic human who is exactly like him." Speaking of this, his old face turned pale. "Can you imagine? Maybe one day when we go out in the morning, we will find that the person who greeted you warmly is no longer himself. It is the Academy sent to monitor us synth. What's more frightening is that maybe one day, when you wake up from your sleep, you find yourself in a strange place, and then someone tells you that you have been kidnapped. And your own life has been replaced. From now on, your life will belong to a cold synthetic human. Your wife and son, none of them will know that the one standing in front of them is no longer the one who gets along with them day and night. It's a man-made monster." Gracie's voice had already begun to tremble, obviously in extreme fear. Chen Yuyan frowned. Could this be the dark cloud over Boston that the mission said? Academy and synths. It's really scary to think about it. A robot that is exactly like you and no one can tell it may replace you at any time. At that time, your life will belong to a robot. And what are you yourself? Even the meaning of existence of the whole person has been obliterated. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 265. 263. Are you big wolf? How do you know about the Academy and synthetic humans? Chen Yuyan asked. It has been circulated in many places, and decades ago in Diamond City, it seems that the incident of synthetic humans hurting people really happened. The Academy and synthetic humans are already a half-open secret, but no one has a direct answer. Evidence to prove it, Grassy said. If possible, I will also pay attention to this aspect. If there are colleges and synths, then I must find a way to destroy them all. Chen Yuyan said seriously. I advise you not to do this, boy. The Academy is an omnipresent and invisible demon. They can kidnap a person quietly, and we have no idea how they do it. Grassy said. If there really exists such an organization that kidnaps civilians and replaces them with synthetics, then I must find them out. Chen Yuyan said seriously. Grassy still shook his head, but he didn't say anything more on this topic. He asked, what are you going to do with Casper? He was spying on Yi and me in the middle of the night. That's okay, just punish him. But he shouldn't frame us as synths. Generally speaking, if you find out that a synth has been mixed in, what will you do? Kill us? It's gone, isn't it? Chen Yuyan asked rhetorically. Oh, Gracie nodded. Then Casper framed such an innocent girl for his dirty thoughts, and wanted to take off her clothes in public and then kill her. What do you think I should do with him? Chen Yuyan continued to ask. Then why didn't you kill him just now? I can see that you are very skilled. It shouldn't be difficult to kill him. Gracie asked. Of course it's not difficult, but I want to give you a choice and let you decide how to deal with him. Chen Yuyan said. Gracie sighed again. Casper grew up in Shizongjuang, what do you want us to do with him? Aren't you forcing us? What if his behavior towards me and Yi happened to you? There is only a difference between 0 and countless times in anything. If he is not punished this time, then he will do it in the face of everything. He sees who is not. If you are pleasing to the eye, you will frame him as a synthetic human, and then kill him. If he does anything, as long as it is exposed, you will frame the other party as a synthetic human. What do you think will happen? Chun Yuyan said coldly. But it's nothing but, Grassy, you should know that there is no fairness or morality in this wasteland. Your tolerance will not be exchanged for the other party's kindness. Moreover, crimes will not change because of age and birth. Chun Yuyan said. Do we have to let us do this? I can treat you very well, and you can stay here for a while. I swear he won't be like this. Gracie seemed to have aged a lot. Perhaps the execution of a neighbor who had been with him for more than 10 years was unacceptable to him. Chun Yuyan replied flatly, you have to know that I am helping you by doing this. If a little kid scares you by simply using the word synthetic human, then maybe you will really become a human in the future. Living under the nightmare of a synthetic human for the rest of my life. Don't you want that? Gracie bowed his head and said nothing more. The next day, Casper and his mother Aimer were tied up and taken to the middle of the village. Gracie and the 3 or 4 oldest elders in the village stood in front with complicated expressions. An old man took a deep look at Casper with a venomous expression on his face, but flinched from his ferocious gaze. Gracie cleared his throat and said loudly, what happened in Ten Pine Manor last night is heartbreaking. We were originally a poor people who had nothing to do with the world and struggled to survive in this wasteland. However, Kawatspa and his mother ML did violated our bottom line. He glanced at the faces of less than 100 villagers around him. Everyone's expressions were filled with fear, but not anger. Gracie raised his voice, as we all know, the threat of the Academy and the synth has always been around us. However, this is by no means a reason for these 2 names to be used to threaten us. Yesterday's matter was originally very simple, and Casper wanted to peeping at this little girl. But because he was hit by someone, he actually directly framed her as a synthetic human without any evidence. And when the truth came out, Aimer shot Casper hurt more. Now Moore is still lying on the bed. He looked at Casper, and continued, you just want to get rid of the crime, but you have adopted such a vicious method. Don't you know what a terrible situation the accusation of the synthetic man will make this little girl suffer? Ha 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 ha. We will take off her clothes on the spot, revealing the skin made of plastic. Then we will tear it off piece by piece. Ha 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 ha. Casper laughed wildly. Gracie ignored him, turned around and continued to the villagers, it doesn't matter if it's a synthetic human or an academy. If it's just like this and people like Casper use it to threaten you, we have to hurry up. Go execute an innocent little girl, and what will our lives be like after that? Yes. Absolutely not like this. Synthetics and the academy are fake. They don't exist at all. Casper should be hanged directly. The burly man from yesterday immediately echoed below. I think so too, Walter. Gracie nodded. Chun Yuyan, and his dependent, daughter, Yi, will stay in Shizongjuan for a while. They came from the wasteland of the capital. Great mercenary. He will provide us with the necessary protection. Now, let's settle the matter with Casper and Aimer first. Those old men also nodded, and came over to discuss with Gracie. Chun Yuyan could clearly see that the expressions of those old men were somewhat complicated, but Gracie's expression was quite angry, and he was still arguing with those old men in a low voice. Then, an old man stood up and said, we have decided to exile Casper and Gracie from Ten Pine Manor. We will never recognize them as our villagers in the future, and the gate of Ten Pine Manor will be closed to them forever. Hearing this decision, a sneer appeared on the corner of Chun Yuyan's mouth. And the old man continued, and you, Chun Yuyan and Yi, Shizongjuan welcomes you for the time being. I hope that you can really bring some difference to our village, as Gracie said. I will try my best to help you, and I also hope to know more about the Federation. Believe me, your life will get better and better. Chun Yuyan said, I will investigate the matter of the academy and the synthetic man. One day, I will give you an answer. I hope so. The old man nodded in greeting. Casper and Amer were stripped of all their weapons, and were pushed out of the village by a few villagers holding pitchforks. Casper turned his head, stared at Chunyuyan with those red eyes, and said ferociously, "I will be back." Chunyuyan didn't care, and replied flatly, "Are you big wolf? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 266. 264 to Concord. Sure enough, you still dare not kill him? Chunyuyan had a sneer on his face. That's why he didn't kill Casper. Because as an outsider, no matter how many reasons he had, if he killed Casper yesterday, he would not be able to stay in this village. To start exploring in this world, it is very important to have a base. On the other hand, it is because of the task. Eliminate the shadows that hang over the Boston sky. From the current point of view, this task refers to the Academy and synthetic humans, so he also wants to know more about how deep this shadow is, and how far the people of Boston are willing to go. After Casper's body was untied, he and his mother ran away, disappearing like a gust of wind. When Casper walked away, the villagers also dispersed. Although they were full of interest in Chunyuyan and Yi, it was obvious that their numbness to life and fear of the Academy had the upper hand. They stay at home most of the time except for occasionally going to the farmland to work for a while. Don't you usually go out? Chunyuyan came to Gracie and asked. Where else to go? This wasteland is full of dangers. Marauders, ghouls, gunmen, robots, super mutants, and beasts, basically every living thing you can see will want to your life. Gracie shook his head and sighed. Didn't old Hardy drive around in a bullock cart? Chunyuyan asked. Don't look at him like that, he is actually very powerful. Moreover, he has prepared several good guns for himself after so many years on the business road. Scattered enemies can't threaten him at all. If he really can't fight, he can still ride a pair of guns. The cow ran away. How could we old bones be like this? Only Walter is still strong, and he can occasionally go out to find some useful things and come back to exchange some necessities with the caravan. Gracie said. Chunyuyan nodded and said, That's fine, I may live here for a while. Is there anything I can do for you? I don't think you can do farming. It would be great if you can provide us with protection. Also, maybe you can help us find some useful garbage in the surrounding ruins. But, you have a gun, right? Gracie asked. Chunyuyan shook his head and said, I don't have a gun. Gracie untied a short-barreled rifle from his waist and handed it over. The gun that followed me before was damaged later. We got this one later. Let it be used by you. As a result, Chunyuyan took a look at the gun, and found that it was a piece of wood with a groove dug, an iron pipe inserted as the muzzle, and a very simple chamber and trigger installed, tied up with wire, and another gun. The bent iron pipe is welded at the back as a butt, which makes a gun. This gun uses .38 caliber bullets, but in fact it doesn't matter if the bullet is bigger or smaller, as long as it can be fired. Gracie said, and took two more of different lengths, but they could be inserted into the gun anyway. He handed over the machine's magazine, save the bullets. This thing can't be called a gun at all. Chunyuyan felt depressed for a while, and it was conceivable that this gun could only be said to be random in terms of power, accuracy, and range. It's okay to scare people, but if you want to kill people, don't even think about it. He began to despair of this world. With these things, why should he fight against General Tailong and Lu Weiwei? But, now that you're here, you can't waste this opportunity. If the task rating is above A, you can bind this world. Because he is the only experimenter in this world, he can immediately achieve monopoly, and in this way, he can permanently bring people back from here. In this case, At least this is a stable source of population. I can only think so. Chen shook his head, returned the bung to Grassy and said, keep this gun, I'll go out and see if I can find more and better guns. When I'm not around, you have to protect the village. This, Grassy was about to say something when he saw Walter walking out with a backpack that had been mended countless times. Seeing Chen and the others, to be more precise, seeing Yi, Walter's eyes lit up, and he walked over and said, Moore's wound shows signs of inflammation, I need to find some medicine, it would be best if I can find a healing needle. I heard that you are mercenaries, why don't we go together? Chen looked at Walter. He was probably in his early 20s, with curly brown hair, and a height of nearly 1.9 meters. He was completely a humanoid tank. But judging from the growth of his muscles, he probably only has a handful of stupid strength, and his flexibility, explosive power, and skill are not enough. What's the matter? Let's go together. In the past, I was the only one in this village who was stronger, and Casper kept stealing my things. Now that you join me, I can go further. How about you? Are you good? Don't worry, just walk behind me when the time comes. Walter saw that Chen was silent, and said again. It's just that when he spoke, his eyes kept staring at Yi. There's usually no danger in the village, right? Chen asked. Generally not. Tenpine village is very remote, there is nothing around, and the looters are not interested in it. There is a pre-war highway overpass to the south, but there is a group of gunmen stationed there. But they will come here. So, the most threat to the village is a few scattered moles. Walter replied. Mole? Threatening the village? How big is it? Chen was stunned. It's so big. Walter gestured to a size of about 1 meter, they will rush in and bite our crops, which is very annoying. But as long as a few are killed, the rest will run away. Speaking of which, I also have a little. It's time to eat mole meat. Mutated creatures. According to what Old Hardy said the night before, the previous super war called the Great War, was a nuclear war. So these creatures are mutations caused by nuclear radiation? So now that we have settled down for the time being, it's time to go out for a walk. Chen nodded and said, that's fine, let's go. Don't you guys use guns? Grassy asked. Are guns rare here? Chen asked back. Guns are everywhere, but you have to be able to get them, Grassy replied. Okay, let's go. Chen took out the dagger and shook it. Walter said, then let's go southwest, there is a small town called Concord over there. Let's go over there and see if there is anything. Be careful on the road, I saw some predators nearby. Thank you for the 200 starting coins rewarded by the peacekeeping infantry. Thanks to the empty moon, 124 and 865 for the reward of 100 starting coins. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 267. 265 Unexpected Surprise. Chen Yi, and Walter were walking in a vast wilderness. Today's weather is a bit foggy, and you can't see too far. The only recognizable thing is the viaduct that is faintly visible to the south. It can be seen as far as the eye can see, it is full of desolation, even the sparse plants are in a semi-dry state, with drooping branches and standing dejectedly. Occasionally, some traces of civilization can be seen here, the broken asphalt road is under the feet, and occasionally a small section of railings can be seen. A large number of vines and unknown plants grew out of the cracks in the asphalt pavement, widening the cracks, and soon withered due to the harsh growing conditions. Gradually, such a strange scene of mixed asphalt road and bushes formed. In this world where human beings have destroyed themselves, nature has gradually begun to reclaim the territory that originally belonged to them. On the broken road, some scattered car wrecks are also scattered here and there. The shape of these cars is very rounded, quite 60s car style. If you want to make a comparison, then throwing the SH brand car and the Volga brand car here is completely harmless. These car wrecks have been weathered and rusted into disrepair, almost only a basic shell is left, and even the original color can no longer be distinguished. Chen Yuyan tried to scan silently by putting his hand on the wreckage of one of the cars. The shape of the wreckage of this car is a bit different, and the engine in front is longer than other cars. The scan is complete, the data integrity of the nuclear-powered car is 1%, and the data can only be entered into the infinite base database after the data is complete. Nuclear-powered cars. Chen Yuyan's eyes lit up. It was just an unintentional insertion, but he actually found out such an incredible piece of information. Such a car is actually nuclear-powered. What does that mean? Miniaturization of nuclear reactors, harmless nuclear fuel rods, and low construction costs. And most importantly, civilian use. Among other things, even if he could get the small and powerful engine of this car, it would be a very big leap for his army of ruins. Old Hardy said that the Great War has been going on for more than 200 years. In other words, although the world has been destroyed by nuclear war, it had a very bright civilization before the war. At least they have very advanced nuclear technology. It seems that this world is not so miserable. Chen Yuyan's originally depressed heart cheered up again. But the data integrity is only 1%? Chen Yuyan walked over and lifted the hood of the wrecked car, and it was really empty inside, not even a single wire was left. Looks like it's already been visited by someone. But it's okay for someone to take it away, at least it means that someone wants this thing. Since it is useful, then maybe technology has not been completely lost. This kind of car, Chen Yuyan was about to ask, but was suddenly interrupted. Be careful! Walter yelled and rushed forward, trying to protect Yi behind him. Only then did Chen Yuyan look over, and found a few beasts the size of a big dog rushing forward. This kind of beast has fat accumulation all over its body, rough skin, and thick flesh, only a few sparse hairs, making it look extremely ugly. The limbs are short, and there are two protruding incisors on the upper and lower jaws. It is actually a mole. But compared to the stupid and cute animals that Chen Yuyan knew, the moles in front of him could only act as ugly. It must have been mutated due to the nuclear radiation after the war. Be careful! They will attack humans. Yi, you stand behind me, and I will protect you. Walter yelled manly. However, before he finished speaking, a figure beside him suddenly flashed, and then only a few bang bang bangs were heard, and those moles were immediately kicked more than 10 meters away like a ball. Before Walter could fully digest the facts in front of her, Yi had already walked back. While walking, she rubbed the pair of shoes that the system had put on for her on the ground, and said to Chen Yuyan, "Dad, I want to change clothes." The clothes are really inconvenient, the fabric is very hard and rough, not only uncomfortable to wear, but also affects movement. Chen Yuyan thought for a while and said, "Go ahead and see if there is a suitable place to change clothes." Only then did Walter recover from his stunned state, and said seriously to Chen Yuyan, "It was too dangerous just now. We should be more vigilant. There are dangers everywhere in the Federation. It would be terrible if Yi gets injured." Chen Yuyan had question marks all over his face. "Do you think Yi will be in danger? She's a girl. We should protect her." Walter argued plausibly. "The problem is that this girl can hit you 100 times, Chen Yuyan rubbed his forehead and said, "Okay, I know you have good intentions, but we don't understand you. The wasteland of the capital is also very dangerous, and we've been fighting over there for years." Walter looked suspiciously at Chen Yuyan and then at Yi. It seemed that he didn't trust them very much, but he continued to move forward. Chen Yuyan chatted with him a lot along the way. Generally speaking, apart from having a little unrealistic fantasy about Yi, this guy is quite an honest person. However, He also learned that the villagers of Shizongzhuang basically stayed in the village all their lives and rarely went out. After all, there are very few people who are capable of dealing with the dangers on the wasteland, and because of the lack of medicines, especially antibiotics, a small wound can often kill a person, so they will not venture out. The only entertainment for the villagers is to listen to radio stations. Diamond City has high-power signal transmission towers, so their broadcasts will be transmitted to far-away places, and they can also be heard here. Generally, some music is played, and sometimes some interview programs are randomly interspersed. Most of them are also for the mayors to show off. And the only channel through which the village can communicate with the outside world is the caravan like Old Hardy. There are many such caravans, so if you are lucky, 2 or 3 caravans will come a month. These people set off in caravans in groups of 3 or 4. As long as they walked along the main road, the general dangers could still be dealt with. The people in the caravan basically collect everything, all kinds of garbage, and they sell everything, sometimes even the glass pieces they pick up on the road. Sometimes, you can really buy some good things from the caravan. For example, the homemade rifle that Grassy wanted to give to Chunyuyan was bought from the caravan for 50 bottle caps. However, the villagers in Shizongzhuang don't have much to trade, just some crops, and after removing the rations, there are even fewer things that can be traded. So over time, the caravan didn't like coming here very much. Speaking of the bottle cap, Chunyuyan was a little surprised. Because this thing is actually the currency in this world. Specifically, it is a metal bottle cap for a cola drink with an odd brand Nuka-Cola, whose trademark is almost exactly the same as Coca-Cola. What exactly happened to make this Coke bottle cap become the currency used in almost the entire wasteland? Chunyuyan felt that if she took this matter back and told Gao Liangzi, she would be very interested. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 268. 266 Fully Armed. Walter's backpack became a little bulging and gave off a strange smell. It was the mole meat he had collected before. He simply peeled the skin, wrapped it in a piece of blackened canvas, and stuffed it bloody into the backpack. In his words, the piece of canvas was specially used to wrap the meat of the beast. Generally, after taking it home, this cloth will be used to cook soup directly, and there will always be some meat in it. This blood-stained soup is naturally very smelly, but it is also an important source of nutrition for people struggling to survive in these wastelands. Chunyuyan also asked Walter why he packed his backpack so full as soon as he went out, and what he would do if he got something in Concord. Walter just replied in a very ordinary way, saying that when the time comes to pick up things, he will decide whether to throw some away. In this case, at least it can be guaranteed that when you go back, you will return with a full load. After walking southwest for an hour or 2, Walter was out of breath, but Chunyuyan and Yi still kept their faces unchanged. The surrounding pavement became very wet, and it appeared that a large amount of water had been drained from somewhere. Chunyuyan looked in the direction of the water flow, frowned and asked, "Is there a river ahead?" He looked at the relatively complete soil and vegetation on the ground again, and shook his head in denial. "No, it's not a river, someone is draining water in large quantities." "Where is that direction?" "There is a bush excavation site over there. I heard that it used to be mined. But no matter what ore was produced there before, it is just a pile of useless broken stones. There are always many strange people doing strange things in the federal wasteland. There is no value there, let's go," Walter said. "Where is Concord?" Chunyuyan asked. "The ruins of a small town are quite large. There may have been tens of thousands of people living there before the war. There may be some things that can be used in those abandoned houses. It takes about 4 or 5 minutes to walk from Shizongzhuang." "Hours," Walter replied. "Have you been there before?" "Old Hardy was there, and told us about it, and marked it on the map." Walter took out a crumpled hand-drawn map, pointing to one of the few marks on it. We may need to spend the night in Concord, if we can get there. Better not spend the night in the wild, or the ghouls will kill us. Well, what is a ghoul? Walter became a little impatient. How do I know so much? Anyway, they are monsters just like people. They bite people when they see them. They usually like to appear at night. Go quickly and save your energy. There is an abandoned room in front, go and sit there for a while. Chun Yuyan saw that this guy's physical strength was indeed dying, so he pointed to the front and said, "This house is not big, and it is built by mixing some wood and iron sheets, which is more dilapidated than the shacks in the slums. There are traces of other houses around, but they have all collapsed." Seeing this, Walter sighed. Maybe there used to be a village here, but everyone left, or they all died. Chun Yuyan did indeed see some charred skeletons among the ruins. When he walked into the house, he saw 7 or 8 corpses that had been bitten by wild beasts, and only scattered bones were piled up in the living room. Lots of bullet holes. It looks like someone ransacked the place, gathered everyone in the house and shot them all. A cruel world, Chun Yuyan said to himself. And Walter had already rummaged around in the house, but found nothing. He just found some bullet casings in the gaps, and some tapes and screws turned out in a drawer. He put away all these things, especially the screws, and wrapped them up in a cloth, afraid of losing them. The search was really thorough. Except for building materials, there was nothing left. Chun Yuyan looked at the wooden house, and said to Yi, "Just change your clothes here, it seems that this wasteland is more dangerous than we imagined. The corpses here speak for themselves. The clothes on the corpses show that these people are civilians, but they were still massacred. It shows that in this wasteland, there may be no human nature in many places." After driving Walter away, Chun Yuyan stood guard at the door of the house, took out his combat uniform and handed it to Yi, and took out a set to change into himself. The material made of biological colloidal material is close-fitting and light, and even has an auxiliary effect on muscle movement. It has an excellent defense ability against sharp weapon attacks. It is difficult to separate military daggers, and it also has a bulletproof function. After activation, it will generate electromagnetic waves. The barrier deflects small caliber bullets away. The Umbrella Company equipped U.S. Captain Rupier with this kind of combat uniform, which is just like something in a sci-fi movie. After putting on the armed belt, military trousers, and jacket over the combat uniform, Chun Yuyan took out an M41A1 pulse rifle and handed it to Yi. Now he and Yi have transformed into 2 majestic soldiers. When Walter saw their equipment, his jaw almost fell to the ground. This is, he could no longer describe this advanced combat equipment, because it was beyond his imagination. "Don't think so much, I just don't want to become one of these corpses," Chun Yuyan said. Walter nodded blankly, then walked ahead to lead the way. For the next time, he didn't even dare to say a word, and he looked a little dodgy when he looked at Yi. They walked for more than an hour, and some scattered building ruins began to appear around them, and there were more car wrecks on the road. Soon, an abandoned town appeared in sight. On the way they were attacked again, this time by a swarm of giant scorpions. These scorpions were at least 2 meters long, and their bodies were extremely hard. The homemade rifle in Walter's hand couldn't penetrate the carapaces of these scorpions at all. But in front of the M41A1 pulse rifle, no amount of such scorpions would be of any use, and after a burst of shooting, they were all smashed into sieves. Seeing the corpses of these mutated scorpions on the ground made Walter very happy. He took off the poisonous glands from the tails of the scorpions and said that each of these poisonous glands could sell more than 30 bottle caps. Concord is finally here, and the town's buildings haven't really suffered much damage. Because they are all concrete structures, and they have not been directly attacked by nuclear bombs. It's just that under the long years of erosion, These houses are also crumbling and dilapidated. They started to inspect houses one by one. To be on the safe side, they did not split up. Because Walter obviously doesn't have the ability to act alone, and Chenyuyan and Yi don't know what is useful to them. Walter, who had boasted about wanting to protect Yi before setting off, now just obediently followed behind the two of them, not daring to speak much. In fact, Walter had come to regard them both as gods after watching them smash the nearly invulnerable mutant scorpion into a sieve with ease. The indestructible M4101 is simply the power of God. Many of these buildings still retain their pre-war appearance. Chenyuyan and the others walked into one of the houses. Although the furniture inside was a bit messy, the previous furnishings could still be seen. The cutlery on the table was also in place, and two black skeletons sat on the chairs beside the table. They should have all been killed by the radioactive rays of the nuclear bomb. Chenyuyan casually picked up a camera on the cabinet next to him. The shape of this camera Chenyuyan had only seen in museums, it was the style of the 1950s and 1960s. Does this family have a hobby of collecting? Wait a minute, don't move. This is a good thing. It can sell at least 100 bottle caps. My God, we are rich. Walter said excitedly, pointing at the camera in Chenyuyan's hand. Just when Chenyuyan was about to answer, there were sporadic gunshots in the distance. Thanks to the book friend 1605100659144481 for the reward of 4,000 starting coins. Thank you for the 1,000 starting point coins rewarded by the Star Sea Rangers. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 269. 267, The Ghoul Attacks. Hearing the gunshots, Chenyuyan became alert instantly. He and Yi exchanged glances, picked up the rifles at the same time, went to the window, and looked out carefully. It was already getting late, it was almost 7 o'clock in the afternoon, and the visibility began to decline. The dense buildings in the town also make the field of vision extremely limited, and you can't see too far away. Gunshots rang out again, still very messy and not concentrated. Chenyuyan listened for a while, and said, there were about 7 gunshots, and there were not many people, and they were far away. Let's ignore that side. There should be 12 guns, and the sound of the other 5 guns is very strange, it seems to be the sound of biu-biu. But judging from the rhythm of the sound, it should undoubtedly be the gunshots used to fight back. Yi added. But Walter couldn't put it down anymore, and he heard Chenyuyan say, there are gunshots in the wasteland of the Federation every day. As long as it is far away from us, it doesn't matter. Go on. There are treasures everywhere here. Ah. Oh. There's even a TV. Chenyuyan also lowered his vigilance slightly, and followed Walter's voice. He saw a TV with a maximum size of 16 inches lying on the ground. He hadn't noticed it just now, but now Walter lifted the TV and saw it. It was a very old TV. Chenyuyan even only saw pictures on the internet, but never saw the real thing. Wait, isn't this a world where there are even nuclear-powered cars? Listen to Walter and robots. But why are cameras and televisions so backward? What happened? Walter skillfully disassembled the TV, and then carefully removed a vacuum tube inside and wrapped it up. At this time, the gunshots got closer, crackling, and it seemed that the fighting between the two sides in the exchange of fire became more intense. Chenyuyan frowned, and the gunfire began to echo, which indicated that the person who fired the gun had already entered the interior of the town. He said in a deep voice, Walter, be careful. The other party may have entered the city. Let's go and have a look. Walter looked at the weather, and because he had a big harvest in hand, he also became cautious. So he shook his head and said, I suggest not. It's almost dark, and the ghouls are coming out soon. We'd better close the doors and windows, and then hide upstairs. We'll talk about something in the morning. Ghost. Chunyuan thought for a while, then nodded and accepted his proposal. For this strange world, it is better to be cautious. They closed the door of the house, blocked it with a table, and found some wood chips or stools to block the windows, and then went back upstairs. Just in case, Chunyuan dragged a tattered wooden bed from the bedroom upstairs to block the stairs. As night fell, the gunshots outside continued to ring out. Chunyuan hid in the shadow of the window, put on the gas mask of the combat uniform, and turned on the night vision device. Sure enough, it seemed to be awakened by the sound of gunfire, and there were waves of terrible roars in the darkness. Under the collapsed broken wall, in the shadow of the ruins, and even inside some potholes, a large number of hunched figures crawled out. In every corner of the town, these figures are almost everywhere. With the help of the night vision device, Chunyuan clearly saw the true faces of these figures. They are a bunch of mummy. The bodies of these mummies have shriveled and shriveled, as if they had been dried for several years. However, the dry muscle tissue did not affect their actions at all. After they crawled out of the corner, they began to look around. Some were attracted by the gunshots over there, but some suddenly raised their heads to look at the house where Chunyuan and the others were staying. Here. In the eyes of these mummies, there was a pale light shining, and as the night gradually deepened, this light became more and more conspicuous. The light in the eyes of countless mummies is dotted with light, like will-o'-the-wisps. Chunyuan was startled, turned around and asked Walter in a low voice, "Is this a ghoul? What do they rely on to move? Sight or smell?" "It should be, all of them," Walter replied with some uncertainty. "Then get ready to fight," Chunyuan said calmly. He returned to the window and looked down at the ghouls from the second floor. These ghouls are actually similar to zombies. Roar. The ghouls below roared loudly and started rushing towards the house. He raised his dry claws and slammed it on the door with a bang. Boom. 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 These ghouls kept smashing doors, and some started running to smash windows. Walter was so frightened that his face turned pale. He was trembling all over, and he couldn't even speak clearly. These ghouls, there are so many of them. I don't know. I know you don't know. Chunyuan comforted casually, if this guy really knew that there were so many ghouls, he wouldn't dare to come if he was killed. But now he is focusing on another direction. These ghouls run at the same speed as normal people or even faster, and judging from the force with which they slam the door, they are much stronger than ordinary people. More importantly, they know how to smash doors and windows. It shows that they still have basic wisdom left. Compared with those T-virus zombies that move slowly and often hit the wall, they are much smarter. In other words, this is a creature more terrifying than zombies. Chunyuan recalled the large mutated mole rats and mutated scorpions they met along the way, the predators who gathered people in the house to massacre, and the group of ghouls downstairs. Either way, it's a deadly threat to scavengers with homemade firearms. No wonder the villagers of Tensongjuang seldom go out, because they are simply not capable of dealing with these terrifying creatures. The reason why Walter wanted to come out and explore so enthusiastically this time is probably because he saw Yi, so it was caused by excessive hormone secretion. The wooden door can't be blocked for too long, and it won't last a night if it goes on like this. Come on. Kill all these ghouls, Chunyuan said. Walter raised his head to look at Chunyuan, then at Yi, gritted his teeth and stood up, picked up his homemade rifle and pointed it at the ghoul outside the window, cursing, "Go to hell." Boom. 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 He pulled the trigger continuously, the rough muzzle spewed out flames, and the bullets hit the dense crowd of ghouls downstairs, splashing a burst of blood. Chunyuan saw clearly through the night vision device. The power of this self-made rifle is really mediocre, the impact of the bullets can't even knock down the ghoul. He picked up his M40-101 pulse rifle, switched to single-shot mode, aimed at the ghoul below, and shot. Boom! There was a flash of lightning at the muzzle of the gun, and a 10mm caliber caseless bullet was fired instantly, smashing the two ghouls straight through. Chunyuan turned his head to look at his shooting results, re-aimed and fired. Bang bang bang. Continuous gunshots rang out, and a large group of ghouls downstairs immediately fell down. Now Chunyuan's marksmanship has improved a lot after getting rid of the bad habits of the previous social marksmanship. His marksmanship is actually quite good. Not to mention that it is almost 100 shots like the ghost, but the target that should be hit can still be hit. At least with this series of shots, he also exploded the heads of several ghouls. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 270. 268 Tramp with Dog. Boom. Boom. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Under the powerful firepower of Chunyuan and Yi's two M40-101 pulse rifles, the group of ghouls were quickly beaten into a pile of bloody rotten flesh. Walter looked at the powerful pulse rifles in their hands, his eyes almost popped out. This is the second time he has seen the power of the M40-101. Compared with this pulse rifle, the homemade rifle in his hand is not even as good as a fire stick. In the end, he didn't even have the courage to shoot, and just watched Chunyuan's performance quietly. Where did you get this equipment, and this gun? Walter finally plucked up his courage and asked. Chunyuan was waiting for the sentence. He smiled and replied, "Do you want this equipment?" Walter nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Chunyuan patted him on the shoulder and said, "As long as you listen to me carefully, you will have such a set of equipment one day." "Really, really?" Walter's eyes lit up. Chunyuan flipped his hands over and took out a brand new Scorpion Type I assault rifle and handed it to him, then said, "This gun is for you first." Walter looked at the assault rifle that seemed to have just been taken off the production line, and even his breathing became heavy. He looked at Chunyuan with a hint of reverence in his eyes. "Can you really give this gun to me? The gun is worth at least several thousand bottle caps." It cost Chunyuan 10 points to produce this gun, but he didn't feel bad about it. It was just a necessary investment. Regarding how to use his remaining 510 points, Chunyuan already had a plan. A production line of Scorpion rifles, a production line of ordinary bullets, and a tiberium mining power station. This is 300 points. With these three buildings, he can already pull up an army in this wasteland. He nodded and said to Walter, "I have been watching you all this way. You are a good guy, so this gun is my approval for you. Bullets are not a problem, so practice marksmanship." "Okay, yes." Walter was very excited. "Brother. Whatever you say in the future, Walter, will go through fire and water. Hee, just call me Boss Yan from now on." Chunyuan said with a faint smile. After the group of ghouls were killed just now, although there will still be scattered ghouls around, they are no longer a threat. Chunyuan simply asked Walter to practice marksmanship, while he and Yi rested beside him. However, not long after, there was a sudden burst of gunfire. This burst of gunfire was very close, and there was only the sound of one gun. Chunyuan became alert immediately, stood up, and turned on the night vision device to follow the sound. All I saw was a man in tights holding a pistol and fighting and retreating, and more than a dozen ghouls were chasing him. And there was a rather strong big dog at the side. From time to time, it rushed over and bit the ghouls' feet, tripping them to the ground. Tights? Dog? Chunyuan frowned. Could this be the person that old Hardy was talking about? Could it be him, the homeless man with the dog? Chunyuan began to observe. He found that this man's skills were indeed very strong, his marksmanship was precise, and his skills were superb. When the ghoul approached, he could always knock the ghoul to the ground with a few punches with skilled skills, and then accurately shot it in the head a few times. Fighting and fleeing like this, more than a dozen ghouls can't get close at all. This man is strong. Chen Yuyan immediately made a judgment that this person has at least the same powerful fighting ability as the members of the USS. Even if it can't compare with Hank and Looper at the captain level, the gap is very close. By the time he ran into a house, only 2 or 3 of the dozen or so ghouls remained. But this man was obviously not very lucky, and gunshots rang out immediately in the house, and it seemed that he was attacked by ghouls as soon as he entered the room. "Go. Let's help him," Chen Yuyan said. "Are you crazy? There are ghouls everywhere at night. Going to the wild is looking for death. And who is that person you go to save him?" Walter objected, but then he remembered something. Trembling all over, bowed his head, he whispered, "Is it a little too reckless?" "Yan, boss Yan." Chen Yuyan patted him on the shoulder and said, "If you recognize me as the boss, then there is no need to be so cautious in the future. Just do what you want, just be obedient." As he spoke, he walked downstairs, turned back and said, "Since that man can chat with old Hardy, he must not be a bad person. Come along, it's dangerous for you to stay here alone. You know him? Then, let's go." Walter had no choice but to follow. He looked at the brand new Scorpion I assault rifle in his hand, and his confidence increased a lot, so he quickened his pace and followed Chen Yuyan. The wasteland of the Commonwealth has never belonged to human beings, and when he walked out of the house and came to the streets of the small town of Concord, Chen Yuyan deeply understood this point. The only source of light was the moon, and the surroundings were almost invisible, except for the flickering pale light in the ghoul's eyes. It was almost impossible to see anything. A hoarse and terrifying roar came from the surroundings, and it was difficult to distinguish the source of the sound. In such an environment, an ordinary person might not be able to survive even 10 minutes. But fortunately Chen Yuyan and Yi are not ordinary people. Even without the help of night vision devices, these ghouls can't pose any threat to him. They easily eliminated more than a dozen ghouls along the way, and Chen Yuyan and the others came to the house where the homeless man with the dog was hiding. The house has returned to silence, and there is no sound. It was obviously impossible for the ghoul in the house to kill that person, so the only possibility was that he had already dealt with the ghoul inside, and was hiding in the shadows and watching his side vigilantly. Chen Yuyan smiled, and dodged to hide in the shadows. It happened to be in the blind spot of the second-floor windows of the house, which is also the most likely place for the homeless dog to hide. He knocked lightly on the door and said, "Don't be nervous, friend. I know old Hardy, and I've heard him talk about you. I don't know why you came here all of a sudden, but I think we can have a good chat and talk about you." A friend. There was still no sound in the house. Chen Yuyan thought for a while, and then said, war never changes. Remember this sentence." There was finally a response from inside, only to hear a man say in a low voice, "Then put down the gun and come in." Chen Yuyan nodded to Yi and Walter, put the pulse rifle on his back, opened the door carefully and walked in. As soon as he entered, a figure appeared in front of him, and Chen Yuyan immediately felt that a gun was aimed at him. It is absolutely impossible for him to let others aim at him, and give his destiny to others to control. Suddenly, his feet swayed, his body swayed from left to right, and then he swayed and rolled forward suddenly to close the distance. The opponent was experienced, and did not shoot rashly, but kept correcting the angle following Chen Yuyan's movements, and never pulled the trigger if he was not sure. He also saw Chen Yuyan's extraordinary skill, and he also understood that as long as he shoots, the opponent will probably seize this momentary opportunity due to the impact of the recoil. But after seeing Chen Yuyan make a few fake moves, he rushed to him, and after realizing that he had encountered a difficult opponent, this person finally pulled the trigger towards the left space. At the same time, he kicked to the right. Boom! The 2 feet hit each other hard. Boom! There was another muffled sound, and Chen kicked the homeless man several meters away. Chen extraordinary strength caused him to make a mistake in his calculations, and this time the mistake was fatal. Chen rushed forward, kicked the man's pistol away, grabbed his arm and pulled him up. The two scuffled for a while. Although the tramp was very powerful, he couldn't compare with Chen who had been strengthened several times. After being beaten up, he fell to the ground panting heavily. Chen walked over and stretched out his hand and said, "How are you? My name is Chen. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the 1000 starting point coins rewarded by the Star Sea Rangers. Thanks to 168299742 for the reward of 100 starting coins.